Good morning, everybody. I'm Susan Williams. I'm one of the staff people here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I work for AARP Texas. So there's like big AARP national, but then each state has their own state offices, and I'm part of the DFW area staff folks. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit today about the AARP network of age-friendly communities. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see it?
Looks good.
Yes, okay. I have to move all of your faces over. Okay. So I want to just sort of just start as background for why there is an age-friendly communities international program that's going on around the world. And as background, I just wanted to demonstrate the need for action by showing you these maps. They really show the dramatic age shift that's going to be happening by 2030. The darker the blue, the more percentages of people 65 plus in those states. So today, almost 46 million people are 65 plus, and that number is going to increase to 73 million by 2030. And worldwide, the population is aging, and here in the US, we're no exception. I like this slide because it's just interesting, because by 2035, there's going to be more people age 65 than there are going to be children in our country. And that's a big change. So our cities really need to be ready to support our growing older adult population, and by committing to preparing for the rapid aging of our population, and by paying attention to the increased needs of older adults in environmental, economic, social factors that will influence the health and well-being of older adults and really everyone in communities. And by doing this, cities are going to be better prepared to serve as lifelong homes for people of all ages. I did want to just throw up the map of the age-friendly network. These are the number of communities in the United States that are part of the network. It is a World Health Organization global initiative that supports communities to become more age-friendly, and AARP is the US affiliate with supporting this network here in the United States. You can see in Texas alone, we have Austin, Brownsville, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Lancaster, San Antonio, and Rowlett are all part of the age-friendly communities network. So the whole thing is kind of built around domains of livability. So think about the built environment. So like, you know, housing and parks and outdoor spaces, sidewalks, roads. But then there's other things that make a community a place where people want to live and where they want to make it, when they call it home. So things like having volunteering opportunities, employment opportunities if folks want them, communications that connect health and social opportunities. Now, some communities choose to work on all of the domains, and others choose to focus on a few domains when they start doing their work. As an example, the City of Rowlett joined the network in 2020, and it's actively working right now on housing, transportation, and social participation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the program, but those were the three areas that they really felt they could make immediate change, and where the citizens told them that they thought that they needed the most work. So I'm just going to run through the domains really quickly. Outdoor spaces, people of course need to gather indoors and out, and parks and sidewalks, safe streets, accessible buildings can be enjoyed by people of all ages. In the listening that we did in our communities, we've heard that folks wanted to use parks, but there's been some barriers. An example is in Dallas. We knew that older adults weren't using the parks as much as we expected, and it turned out through our listening and our surveys that it was the sketchy bathroom situations. Older adults would like to be able to go to the bathroom, and so having the bathrooms either locked or not functioning or just feeling unsafe was really a barrier to have people using the parks. Transportation is always really, really important in any of the work that we do on livable communities. Driving can't be the only way to get around. We know that people need a variety of public, private, and nonprofit transportation options to meet their needs. Housing, of course, is another really important one. Most older adults really want to age in place and stay in their community of choice, but in doing so, homes have to be appropriately designed or modified, and if a community includes affordable housing options for a variety of life stages. Housing was really identified by the citizens of Rowlett as one of the main concerns. And then social participation and isolation and inclusion. I mean, regardless of one's age, everybody has loneliness at some point. And I think in this last couple of years, it's even more an issue than it's ever been before. Loneliness can really affect a person's health, their sense of well-being, their ability to stay, in their communities. And isolation can be combated by offering the availability of accessible, affordable, and some fun social activities. I know that from our standpoint at AARP this last 2 years, we haven't been able to meet in person like we normally do. And so we have changed to do all of our stuff virtually. And it's been fun being able to offer all this different programming than we've ever done before. So we have everything from cooking classes to concerts to how to use the computer to advocacy issues that are all on our website and available to our members and non-members at any point. And I think it's really helped to bring folks together. But I do miss my volunteers. I work with all volunteers, and not being able to see them in person for 2 years is terrible. The fifth domain is civic participation and employment. And an age-friendly community has to provide ways that people can choose to work for pay if they want to, volunteer their skills, and be actively engaged in the community. Domain 7 is community support and health. Communications and information. I was reading the wrong one. We have to recognize that not everybody has a smartphone and access to the internet, and that information needs to be disseminated through a variety of different sources. And I went too far. And the last domain is community support and health. So community health, at some point, everyone's going to become ill or hurt or just maybe need a little bit of help. So while it's important that care is nearby, it's also important that it's accessible and affordable for residents that require any services. So I wanted to pop this one up there. The AARP Public Policy Institute has developed this AARP Livability Index. And it's kind of cool. You can go in and put in your city, your zip code, your house, and it'll tell you where you rate on a scale of 1 to 100 as far as livability around some of the important areas that we consider just kind of things that are important for livability. I did look before the meeting, and Rowlett scored a 49. And it was really access to affordable housing and transportation options and social engagement opportunities that kind of brought that down. Garland scored a 53 and Plano scored a 59. So just to give you an idea, I encourage you to go on there and check it out. It is really interesting. And I mean, it talks about how many parks are within a certain area of your house and access to shopping and all sorts of stuff. So it's just kind of a cool tool that's been developed the last couple of years. And then they asked me to talk a little bit about strategies for mobilizing neighborhoods and some ideas that I wanted to share, learnings really from the pandemic. I didn't know my neighbors that well before the pandemic. And since we've all kind of been stuck in the house for a while and in our neighborhoods, I feel like people got out more and we got to know each other. And it's led to some cool advocacy opportunities in our community. So I guess some strategies to engage and mobilize neighborhoods. First thing first, get to know your neighbors. It's so easy to not do that and to just, I don't know, in my neighborhood, we have alleys. And so we never see each other unless we're in the alley. So making concerted efforts to do things with the community and with your neighborhood, I think, is a really great way to start in mobilizing. One really cool thing that came out of the pandemic is there's been a lot of safe streets projects, so folks can apply with the city to have their neighborhood blocked off through traffic for a certain period of time, like maybe a couple of weeks, to allow residents to kind of engage and participate without worrying about the traffic zipping through. I think that's a really cool program. Seen a lot of people starting community gardens. It's a nice way to engage intergenerational groups and serve a purpose of growing food and being outside. Another really good way to engage the community is through volunteerism, particularly like this time of year. Food, coat, or diaper drive might be really great. And one thing that we did at the beginning of the pandemic, when the folks in long-term care facilities couldn't have visitors, we know that we're feeling really, really isolated. So our volunteers organized around the state to send cards. We did handwritten cards and then mailed them to some of the facilities that had more vulnerable populations. And it was just a cool way for the neighborhood to get together and do something that was useful and felt good. Other ideas might be to organize a park cleanup day. That's always a great way to get folks out. And then if you have areas in your neighborhood that maybe don't have sidewalks or the lights aren't really timed right or things that you don't feel are great for walking and pedestrian stuff, is you can do a walk audit or a home fit audit. And AARP on our website, we have different tools for both of those things. But it's a great way to go out real time and kind of walk your neighborhood and find out where some of the issues are. And then I was going to just mention another one after I said find a collective cause, but I just came back from Michigan visiting my daughter, and she lives in an area with tons and tons of trees, but some people don't rake the leaves. And so then the water drains are blocked, and then it causes flooding, and then it's just this continual cycle of problems. And so they've really advocated to do education in their neighborhood about why it's important to clean up the leaves. And then they're working on a city ordinance to help remove some of the flooding issues too. So just interesting way to like find a common cause in your neighborhood that might get everybody together on something. And then I can't talk about engaging with neighborhoods without talking about social media, whether you love it or hate it. It is out there. And I know that Neighborhood Facebook and I think nextdoor.com, and there's a variety of other websites where neighbors can connect. And then the other project I just wanted to mention was a bike repair co-op. So at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people got bikes because they didn't want to use public transportation. So one of the neighborhoods in South Dallas applied for a grant through AARP for a community challenge grant. And they set up little kiosks around the area where people could learn bike safety, bike repair. They had stuff to fix tires and stuff, and taught everybody sort of how to do that and maintain their bicycles. I thought that was a really cool way to get the neighborhood engaged. And then just don't forget the fun. If it's not kind of fun, people aren't going to want to participate in stuff. If you don't do National Night Out in your neighborhood, that's a nice way to get everybody together. And make sure that you're inclusive and welcoming to anybody that's new to the neighborhood. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was just be involved and informed about local politics. Attend the city council meetings if you can. Join commissions. It's a great way to make impact in your own community. And advocate for change if you see something. So many people will say, oh, they need to do something about that, when it's really, if it's more of an attitude, we need to do something about that, it really things can get done. And then just some conversation about how you can impact your community locally. In my opinion, I think intergenerational approaches can really help foster social and economic growth for residents of all ages. I did a project, it's been several years, but I had high school students hosted older adults in their computer classes to teach them how to use Facebook. And it was a cool way to learn how to use the internet. But the thing that struck me so much is at the end of it, some of the kids said they'd never seen an old person up close. Families are moving farther and farther away. Grandparents aren't right there. And so it was really cool because a lot of the older folks said they hadn't talked to a high school student either. So it was just kind of fun to see them connect through something. And then just as you're doing this kind of work and trying to do community impact, you have to develop alliances with all different kinds of organizations in your community. So if there's a university, schools, faith-based organization, the clubs and social groups, and of course, local business is also really important to be included. And then I also think just making sure that everybody has a chance to participate in a leadership role. Everybody has their own skills and everybody has something to offer. So making sure that there are a variety of plays that people can volunteer. Some people might want to just man the table at National Night Out. Other people might want to canvas. Somebody else might want to clean up the park. But it's really important in your role as just sort of being part of the community organizing to make sure that you're honoring and inviting people to participate with any skills that they have. And then the last thing is just creating places and practices and policies that really promote interaction across the lifespan. I'd love to say that what serves an 8-year-old also serves an 80-year-old. If you've got walkable neighborhoods and sidewalks and parks and places for people to live, it's a benefit for young people, old people, and everybody in between. And at the bottom of this, I did put a little URL for Generations United. They have a really great resource. It's an intergenerational community resource guide. And so I just wanted to put that up there. Laura, are the slides going to be shared with people?
I believe so, but if not, I'll make sure that they are.
I'll throw my contact information up as well at the end in case anybody wants to write it down, because I can also share stuff. So I just kind of wanted to leave you all with this thought before I move into the specific Rowlett stuff. So we've talked about planning around the domains of livability, and planning change can seem really daunting. But at the local level, it's the little things that really make a community livable. So here's my example. Everybody stands at a crosswalk at some point. Now see the gentleman in the sweater, he's a veteran. The woman next to him is a loving grandma who finds time to still work in her library and in her community. The young man with the backpack is a high school student, and the young guy carrying the toddler that is in no mood to sit in the stroller is just trying to get home. So they're all different ages, they have different abilities and strengths, and they hold different statuses on the socioeconomic spectrum, yet they all have one thing in common. And in this case, they have 14 seconds to cross the street before the light changes from green to red. So a lot of times it's the little things like 14 seconds that really make the difference between a community being mediocre and a place to just kind of pass through, or a place that makes you feel like welcome home. It's really the little things that make a neighborhood really livable. So that's kind of the end of my part. Pat Bird with the Senior Advisory Board of Rowlett was meant to be here, but she ended up having a conflict at the last minute. So I'm going to go ahead and cover her slides. Laura, do you want me to take questions for me first, or do both?
Why don't we go ahead and run through the Rowlett slides, and then we can go ahead and take questions, or however you want to do it.
Does anybody have a burning question for me, or shall we? Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Rowlett then. Rowlett became an age-friendly community. They were the very first community in the country in 2020, which we kind of did that on purpose. We made sure that we got the application in just at time so it would be approved the first day of 2020, just for fun, not knowing that 2020 was going to be so much fun. So the Senior Advisory Board and the Park and Recreation staff are the ones that have really taken most of the lead on this project. And then they have 3 stakeholder teams that they work with as well. So, oops, apologize. So the vision that they came up with was all community stakeholders support Rowlett's strategic initiative of quality and life transportation and neighborhood livability by fostering an inclusive community of all ages who choose to live, work, and play in Rowlett. And their mission is Rowlett is committed to creating an age-friendly culture and diverse community that promotes positive elements as a city and as a place for everyone to participate as they grow and thrive. So they shared that with the stakeholder groups to make sure everybody was in agreement. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they really did decide to focus on housing, transportation, and social participation. And that was really after going through all of the survey results and having some listening sessions. And really the whole point of the age-friendly work is to ask people what they need, not tell them what they need. And so this listening part of the project is super important. And that's really how Rowlett managed to narrow everything down. So their housing program involves current homes and houses being built suitable for seniors, housing options for different incomes, ages, and life stages. Transportation includes sidewalks, crosswalks, bicycle lanes, public transportation options, because driving just can't be the only means we have to get around. And again, social participation to address loneliness that can be debilitating and combats people being all by themselves and have opportunities to socialize, and the availability of affordable and fun social activities. So once again, I'm just going to throw these up here. This is the description of the housing domain from the AERP policy book. And Rowlett really wants to work to improve accessibility and accommodations for people of all ages, abilities, and to address affordability and choice, and overall make the community more livable. In transportation, it's the vital link that connects everybody. It's so interesting when doing this work. You can have all the social activities in the world, you can have houses, you can have employment opportunities, you can have volunteer opportunities, but if people can't make that connection to get to where they need to go, it's really where it all falls down. So this is transportation is one of the really key things to work on. And I was really pleased to see that that's where they started. And here's a description of the social participation and inclusion. And basically, they just want to ensure inclusive programs that provide opportunities for older residents to socialize and engage their peers and with younger people to keep older adults active, engaged, and included. Just to explain the process a little bit, this is a chart that sort of shows the whole process of when a community might want to become an age-friendly part of the network through doing the whole thing. So a community can apply for enrollment and they're accepted, and you don't have to do any tests or do any of the stuff before that. You become part of the network. And then the first year, you really conduct surveys and listening sessions and talk to people and find out what's needed. A lot of times I feel like we start out thinking we know what's needed, and then it's little things like the bathroom issue at the parks in Dallas that, you know, kind of come to a head as you go out and actually talk to people and ask them what it is that they think they need. And then from there, an action plan is created. And then it goes into implementation phase. And then every 5 years or so, we do a little project assessment and a status update. And so this is what has been done so far in Rowlett. As I mentioned, on January 1st, 2021, the City of Rowlett was accepted as a member of the network. February through March, they did a survey, and it was conducted to get feedback from older adults on what they thought is needed for Rowlett. And then, of course, because of the pandemic, the Senior Advisory Board wasn't able to meet again until June. And at this time, the survey results were really reviewed and prioritized for what they were going to work on. They also hosted 2 listening sessions at the end of January as another meet of getting feedback. And in February, the mission and vision statements were developed and began development of the stakeholder groups to meet in each domain. So what's next is stakeholder teams are going to make their final recommendations for the action plan to the Senior Advisory Board. Then the Senior Advisory Board will approve the action plan and make its recommendations to Council. Council hopefully will approve, and then the action plan gets submitted to AARP to be part of the network. And then after that, implementation of the action plan will begin in 2022. And then they'll continually, just a continuous process of improvement. And in 2025, they're going to do an evaluation and progress report. So that's what Rowlett's been up to. That is just my contact information. And I also put the gentleman that's at the City of Rowlett if anybody has specific Rowlett questions for them.
Awesome. Susan, thank you so much. Oh, sorry, was that your last slide?
That was it. Should I leave it up here for a minute or take it down?
Yes, no, that would be perfect. That would be perfect. No, Susan, thank you so much for walking us through just that process, as well as all of the other information about making our neighborhoods more livable for people of all ages. I am going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So you can feel free to use the chat feature to put your questions there, or you can use the raise your hand feature as well to ask some questions for Susan. Let's see, do we have any questions? Okay, Kathy Kinkle, did I say that correct?
Yes.
All right, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, this might be a silly question, but I'm wondering what your definition of seniors is. And the reason I'm coming from that, asking that question is I do a neighborhood newsletter, and I think about it over a year ago, I sent out some information I'm in Plano, the link to like services for seniors. And I got a huge amount of comments about what, over 50? That was sort of the Plano definition of what are
Yeah.
seniors. So I'm just wondering, you know, as you approach this, well, how are you defining that?
It depends on who you ask. One thing I've learned is I don't use the word senior because us boomers are never going to want to be called seniors. We are older active adults. And so there's just other ways of phrasing it. And it really depends on which organization and for what you're asking. So for ARP, our membership is 50 and over. But then like the area agency on aging, where they do federally and state funded services for folks, that starts at 60. Some of the nonprofits and the cities do 65. So it just kind of depends. I consider older adults kind of anybody over 50, but again, I don't use the word senior anymore because it's just not something people like to identify with.
Okay, that's how, like I said, I was really,
Yeah.
the reaction was overwhelmingly like, you know,
I'm not a
what?
senior.
I've been a senior for 10 years, you know, or 15 years, and I didn't know it, you know?
Yeah, I just had my 60th birthday this week, and I can't believe I've been a senior for 10 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. Any other questions for Susan? You can raise your hand. I'm also going to be pasting or posting some contact information into the chat for the Plano Senior Center, as well as the Garland Senior Center. So if you're joining us from these different cities, those are the respective contact information as well. So
I know a lot of older adults tend to go to the rec centers too, not just necessarily the senior centers. So that's always another good place to find people that might be gathering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Susan, I have a question for you, if that's okay. You had mentioned transportation initiatives as really being the key. Like, how can we, both on the neighborhood resident level, but then also on the city level, like, how can we begin to make those types of connections better for our, I guess, active older adults?
Perfect. I think that you need education. So people need to know kind of what's out there. The public transportation has a lot of different words that don't necessarily mean anything to anybody, like paratransit and last mile and all sorts of stuff. So I think making sure people know what's out there, what's available, and what it's called and how to access it is really important. And then sometimes it's just not adequate enough. There was one area, I'm sorry, Jade just sent something up on the screen. There was one area that we were working with that had, I think it was 2.5 miles between bus stops. And now I don't care if you're an older adult or if you're 18 in a Texas summer, walking 2.5 miles to get to the bus stop, to get to the grocery store, to schlep all your stuff back isn't good enough. So there was a lot of advocacy from that particular neighborhood that worked with DART and with the city to try to make some improvements in those areas. So identifying your services, making sure people know about them, and then if there's gaps, trying to fix them. And it has to be a mixture of public, private, and a nonprofit partnership, or it's never going to be enough for everybody.
Okay, Kathy, you have a question?
Well, I guess it was just a comment on what you were talking about with the transportation, because my adult daughter, like in her 20s, never learned to drive. And so she has to use public transportation. And to your point about what makes a neighborhood livable for a senior also makes it livable for other ages. I mean, that's clearly a young girl walking late at night, getting off work at midnight, had to walk 2 miles. I mean, that was her situation. She had to walk 2 miles to where she was living. It was really hard, you know, it limited her jobs and that she could take on because of safety. So I think you're exactly right that, you know, looking at it from a broader perspective, yes, those are things that you might tie into that work with seniors. But when you're trying to prioritize things, there's probably a lot of issues that will make it more livable for everyone. And transportation,
Absolutely.
I definitely think is a key thing.
Well, and just getting college students to school. I mean, there are so many different ways that transportation really impacts everything. So thank you for that comment. That's really right on.
Okay, any other question? Oh, Miss Cheryl, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm a new board member for the Senior Advisory Board.
Okay.
So both of the, I'm having a senior moment, but both of the program, that you talked about, all the slides really were helpful for me to kind of catch up for what they're doing, and because I just have been to one meeting, so
Okay, that's great.
it was very helpful on both ends of the slides because I'm on I was already on the one of the committees prior to. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you that it was very, very helpful, very informative.
Thank you. I think Rowlett has done an incredible job in just deciding they wanted to do this and getting it done in probably the worst possible conditions. So kudos to them for moving this forward during a pandemic.
Right. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, any other questions? I'm checking the chat. I'm checking for raised hands. If no one else has a question, I have another question. Sorry, Susan.
No, go ahead.
So one thing that we encounter often, you had mentioned earlier in your presentation that older active adults like to, I guess, age in place and stay in their homes and
Stay in their community of choice is what I usually use, because
Yes.
it's also it's not just your house, it's your church, it's your friends, it's your neighborhood. So it's more than just a roof over your head.
Yes, no, absolutely. How are there any resources that you're aware of? Sometimes people that we encounter just don't have the physical ability to maintain their homes, or the financial ability, or even just the capacity to manage some of these home repairs. Do you know of any other resources available that we can also connect them to, and things like that?
Yeah, the area agency on aging, there's different area agency on aging all over the state. And so that's a good place to start for resources. You can also dial 211 and just say, I'm having trouble paying my electric bill, or my mom's having this issue with whatever, and they can help direct you to the appropriate resources within cities, but also within nonprofit communities. And then, just because you talked about affordability, I want to bring up one other thing that I'm really kind of fascinated with, and they're called accessory dwelling units. They used to be called granny flats. So it was, you put a little house in the back of your property. But what's cool about it is not that you have a second property. Well, I guess it could be if you have a second property that you can rent out on Airbnb and make some extra income. It can keep you from having to have a financial issue with your home. But it's really also a really nice way for older adults to move into the smaller place possibly, and then their kids and family move into the bigger place, and then everybody still stays together and that caregiving kind of goes on. It's also a great way if your person that you're caring for has to have a caregiver full time, it's a place for them to stay. So it's got a bunch of different benefits. I'm not sure what the situation is with accessory dwelling limits in the 3 cities that we're talking about today, but that's something I just think is really a fascinating new development. It's not even new. It became really popular post World War II, and then they made it illegal. So it's coming back now.
Wow, that is interesting. Any other questions? I'm looking for hands up. We have about 3 more minutes left for questions. If not, I might go ahead and let us, we can either end early, or if there's something else that you wanted to share with us, Miss Susan.
I think I've talked plenty. I was so worried about not getting through my slides. I just was like, blah, 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 blah. So sorry if that was rushed. Please feel free to
No.
reach out to us. There's two of us that work in the DFW area. My colleague is Zulema Solis, and I'm Susan Williams, and we do all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, plus areas of North Texas and East Texas. And the reason it works at AARP is because we have very little staff, but we have incredible volunteers. So I have an army of active older adults who are out there doing the good work. And they're not stamp lickers. They're people that really are the AARP base in their communities. So I just wanted to mention that because that's such an important part of everything that we do at AARP.
Awesome. Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. As she mentioned, please feel free, participants, please feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions.